not everybody's for me, and that's okay. And it's really important that, hey, my story is a part of how I think, how I talk about social media, how I talk about my business. And if there's something about that story that you're like, that's not for me, cool. That's great. We have now just figured out we're not a match, but we've done it in a way that nobody's time was wasted.
Welcome to Who Cares About My Story, the podcast on how sharing your personal brand story can impact your business. We will explore the perks and also the behind the scenes challenges of figuring out what to share. I'm your host, Reme Mancera, a personal brand strategist who loves finding the story connectors that illustrate the benefits of what you offer. And by the way, you don't need a Hollywood style for that. In case you ever wonder, remember, your story is relevant and worth telling. Hey there! I can't wait for you to listen to today's episode. Our guest is Tamay Shannon, a digital marketing strategist with over a decade of experience. She specializes in using social media to boost business success. In this episode, she explains how sharing her story has been a way to make her business reflect who she is, while allowing people to see if they are a good match. She also uses her narrative to remind herself that her journey is valid and that she can run her business on her own terms. Tamay talks about the risk of following cookie-cutter methods and also emphasizes the value of acting consistently, navigating the fear of missing out, and being strategic with your social media presence. For her, putting intention and thought into your actions is key to reaching your long-term business goals. So get comfortable and listen in as Tamay shares her wisdom and valuable insights. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. Hello, Tamay. Welcome to Who Cares About My Story. So happy to have you here.
Yay, so happy to be here. Thank you.
So let's dive in. I am looking forward to this conversation. Please tell us a bit about you and what you do.
So short of it is, I do social media. I create strategies and execution for platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I've been doing it, well, X now, but I've been doing it for over 13 years at this point.
Wow, that's a long journey.
Yeah, it is a long journey.
Especially in digital years, as I call
Right.
them.
Especially, right, exactly. It's like dog years. They're way much longer.
Yeah. So, can you please share to us a bit of what's your story and how did you get here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got started um when in '08 the US had a huge economic downturn, and it was just, I mean, the world did, honestly. And so that's when I got out of school and nobody was hiring. And so I was doing a lot of gig work, I was a teaching assistant, doing a lot of things on the side. And my mom suggested that I start a business. And I was like, oh my goodness, mom, that's a horrible idea. Because I thought at that point, to be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner, that I had to have an MBA. I thought I had to have worked in corporate for 20,000 years. I thought I had to have all these things that at that point I didn't have. And so it took me 6 months before I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. I'll give it a try. Let me see what happens.
Hmm. Okay, nice. Thank you for sharing that. Um, what about your experience sharing your story? How there was there a specific moment when you realized that sharing your story was going to have an impact in your business?
What, I don't know if there was a specific moment, but it was I would say, an era in my business where when I first started my business, it was very much copying what I saw others doing. Oh, so
Mm.
this is how you're successful. You get up at 5 a.m. Okay, I'll get up at 5 a.m. Oh, so this is what you have to do. Okay, I'll do that. And it got to a point in my business where I'm like, that is not working for me at all. And so I, in the journey of looking to make my business truly my business and make it reflective of who I am, what's important to me and how I want it to grow, what became apparent is that I was absent. And so me sharing my story is a way that I use to really make my business mine and have people know who I am. Not everybody's for me, and that's okay. And it's really important that, hey, my story is a part of how I think, how I talk about social media, how I talk about my business. And if there's something about that story that you're like, that's not for me, cool. That's great. We have now just figured out we're not a match, but we've done it in a way that nobody's time was wasted.
Mm. Yeah. And something, because the goal of this podcast, one of the goals is to create space where we showcase that there are many different ways to run a business.
Yes.
Because I'm kind of tired of these cookie cutter formulas and gurus telling us
Right.
what is success. So let me define my version of success. Right? And I believe that each of us, we need to take a minute to think about that. And I heard in an interview that it took you a while to find out what professionalism looks like for you
Yeah.
and how a business owner could look like. How do you
Yes.
think sharing that experience has helped your audience? And can you elaborate a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, totally. So for me, I think that is one of my more selfish stories in that I will be fully honest. I don't actually know how it helps my audience, right? I know what it does for me.
Hmm.
And so for me, it reaffirms and reminds me, as a Black woman, that I can run my business in a way that that's in alignment with me. And I assume it'll help others because I've heard other stories and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that was possible." So I assume it helps other and I trust that it does, but I can't say that it does, but I know that it helps me because it keeps me grounded in my truth and my reality and reminding myself that my journey is valid, how I do things is valid, and I don't have to do the copy paste cutter method to have my business work, to have my business be successful. And so yeah, that's so I share it to remind myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. That's really good because it's the first step to be for our audience
Mhm.
is to be for ourselves, right?
Right.
Yeah. Um, so I also heard how you love books and how this is something that helps you to decide what to study. So how do you think that's related to your passion now for social media and for communication and the works that you do?
I love books because I love words. I think words are so cool. I love looking at how words, like language is a living thing, and I just love to explore how things change and grow and take on different meanings. And so for me, that translates into being able to leverage and use social media to have a conversation that speaks to a particular point in time. Like, it used to be that bling bling was a word that everybody used, and now if you say it, it does two things. It's like, wow, that's an old word, but also it takes you back to a particular point in life, right, where
Mm.
that was a thing that everybody talked about and that was a feeling that everybody gave. And so I love words for that, and I love marketing for that because words are cool. So yeah, that's how I got into books. That's how I get into marketing. It's just words and communicating ideas.
That's amazing. And I like how language is a living thing and social media is a living thing and how our businesses are evolves and how we need to refresh our messaging and the ways that we share our stories and the way that we present in the world, right?
Mm. Yeah, I think that it is it it is the most wonderful thing about being a business owner and the most horrible thing about being a business owner is that you get to choose. and you get to refresh and you get to realign. And there's nobody to tell you that's right or that's wrong. And so sometimes that's super freeing because you're like, ooh, this is what I want it to look like. And sometimes I'm speaking for me, I want somebody to tell me, follow these steps, this will be your outcome. And that's not what business is like, even though that's what I crave. I'm like, just tell me what to do. Just tell me the A, B, and C, and I will do it. So yeah, the idea that you can, especially if you've been in business for a while, right? Like who you are in the beginning is different than who you are at 5 years, is different than who you are at 10 years. And who you serve and who you want to serve shifts and changes as you get personal life experiences. Other things become important to you. And so your business absolutely should be a reflection of where you're at, because at the end of the day, we want our business to work for us. And so we've got to, if we want that to happen, we've got to take into consideration who we are and what we're doing for our business to work for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I 100% agree that how making decisions is one of the best and worst things of running a business, and how that was not, that was something unexpected for me at the beginning. It's like, wow, this is something to address.
Right.
um, Speaking of getting help and getting guidance, have you had some help in shaping your messaging and deciding what to share from your story?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I do not know about y'all, but for me, the stuff that I think about, that's a good story, or the stuff that I think is a bad story in particular, like, oh, nobody wants to hear that. When I get help, that's when I get the feedback like, that's exactly the thing you should share. That is amazing. And I'm like, oh, that old thing? Nobody cares about that. So, yes, I've absolutely had help, not only in helping me identify, my stories, but also reminding me that stories don't have to be big or huge or like, super traumatic, or like I was sleeping in my car and now I make $6 million every second. Like it doesn't have to be like that to be a story that connects you to others.
Mm. I love that you bring that, because that's one of the main messages that I try to convey. Because for some people, they might think that they need to have an epic story,
Right, right.
and it's not like that. And especially as a business owner, one of the most important parts is that it's something strategic.
Yes,
And sometimes people can think about strategic as a bad thing, and
yes.
it's not that you are pretending things or faking or anything like that. It's just that you are being strategic with the parts of your story that you are deciding to share, because that will help your audience to get more context and understand
Mhm.
your journey better and trust you more. So it's for helping your audience to really understand who you are. So being
Yes.
strategic is something too super important to me. And as you say, choosing small stories, quote unquote small,
Mhm,
um, is also helping to connect those little stories with the
mhm,
specific key
mhm,
factors of your
mhm.
offering, of the people that you help, of the message that you are trying to convey, and the values that are important to you. So 100% agree on the the value of sharing those little stories and doing it
Mhm,
in a strategic way.
mhm. And I love that you brought up strategy and strategic, because that, like, you're right, people do feel some kind of way about it, but it really is the thing that one will make your business grow, because it just means you're putting intention and thought into your actions, into what you share. And so if you're not being strategic, that means you're not putting intention and thoughts into how you share and what you're doing. And if you're doing that, you're likely frustrated, you're likely overwhelmed, you're likely tired, you're likely like, I don't know how this is going to work out, because you haven't put the intention and thought behind it. And so being strategic is the thing that will have you being able to do the 4-hour work week if that's a goal for you. Or if you want to work remote and you want to be able to work on the beach, you have to be the thinking behind it to be like, all right, if I'm going to be able to spend a day at the beach, what do I have to do now? How do I have to build and construct my business? How do I have to share what I offer in such a way that I can spend 6 months in Milan and 6 months in Florida, or whatever it is that you want?
100%. Um, the name of the podcast is Who Cares About My Story? Have you ever asked yourself that question?
I have I have I did a in grad school I did a like an art project,
Mhm.
or was it grad school or was it college, I don't know. In upper education I did a project, and that was one of the main things that I was really inquiring about, is like, who who cares, what's the impact, how does it propagate? And so I was asking a lot of my peers and asking them these questions, and then compiled it into an art book. But it it is something that I think about, because me personally, I believe that I have the opportunity, by living a life that I love, to inspire others to do the scary things and do the same.
Mm,
And so I'm always thinking about, is this something that I want to do? Not like, am I having fun doing it, but is this aligned with what I'm
mm,
up to? Is this aligned for me? And so yeah, who cares is important, because I keep an eye towards, um if where I'm at, if I can say nobody cares about what's happening, then for me, that's a signal that maybe I'm not in the right space.
mm,
Like, if nobody cares about what I'm doing in the space that I'm at, maybe I have put myself in a space that is not for me. And that's why they don't care. Not their fault, right? Like, if I give my dog, if I give her a treat that she doesn't like, I don't get mad at her. I'm not like, oh my gosh, you should like this treat. It's a treat. Other dogs like this treat. Why don't you like this treat? She's like, I don't like the treat. And so it's the same thing with your story. Like, for me, it's like, if I'm in a place where I'm like, wow, nobody cares at all, then I'm like, oh my goodness, then this is not for me. This space, this area is not for me, and I'm going to go where people care, where people are receptive, where people want to hear.
That's so insightful. I love that. And I kind of see a connection between you making that art project, asking people about their stories, and now you helping people to share their stories on social media. So I can
Right.
see there a connection, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yes.
So in those moments that you felt that you were not in the right place or in the right space, how did you pivot or how you decided where to focus on?
So most of that time, it happened when I was talking about, in the beginning of my business, how I thought I had to do business, and how I was
Mm,
copying how others did business. And it was most of the time, it happened around that, where I was like, oh, okay, wait. If I'm going to continue to do this and build this business, how will I shape it in a way that's affirming to me? How will I shape it in a way that gives me something, that has me excited to be in the business? And so it's just a conscious, and sometimes difficult, right? Because for me, I'm like, yes, I know I shouldn't do this. Yes, I know it's not for me, but everybody says it works for them, so maybe I should try it just in case. Right. And so there's this idea that I'm wrong and I'm messing up and I'm going to miss out if I don't do this thing, or if I don't show up in this particular space. And so, yeah, it's a conscious decision, but it's also paying attention to the mind gremlins that tell me, no, you should definitely do that because everybody else does it. And if you don't, you're going to miss out and everything's going to be horrible and it'll be bad and you'll be wrong. And it's like, oh my gosh, okay, wait, that's not true. It's okay. You can make the decision. So, yeah.
mm, yeah, how our minds put us in the worst case scenario, like everything will ruin and all your work that you did in the
Exactly.
past is going to be for nothing. Right? Um, yeah, and I like the idea that you bring about the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And I have the feeling that, especially related to social media, all of us is like, there is a new social media channel. We need to go there. And it's like, yeah, maybe before jumping from trend to trend, looking
Yeah.
at, okay, what's my strategy? What is the message that I want to convey? Where is my audience? And all the stuff that is
Yeah.
back to the strategy, right?
Right.
And then it's like, it makes sense that they try this new channel or not. So, can you share a bit about that and your experience with clients in those situations?
Yeah. It's definitely, yeah, people absolutely like, oh, this is the new thing. I've got to go there without considering the work it takes to be successful on that platform, right? Because everybody's like, oh, TikTok's amazing. TikTok is going to do wonderful things for your business. But if you don't consider the amount of video content you've got to create, the amount of time and editing that you or your team have to manage, that might be a wonderful platform for you. But if you can't invest the time and the effort, then it's not a good platform for you. You might be focused on something else. You might be doing licensing. You might be launching a new product or service and you don't have the time to devote. That's fine. That's okay. But I think a lot of people, when they're trend hunting, like you said, FOMO, fear of missing out, but it's also a sense of, this is the magic bullet. This is the
Mm,
thing that will get me to the seven figures. This is the thing that will solve all my problems. And that's never the case. But there is sort of kind of that wish and dream that if you could just take on this new thing, do this new thing, it'll work out perfectly for you and you'll be on, Oprah, or you'll be on the stages you want to be on, and you'll be like, yes, all due to that one TikTok video I posted that went viral and everybody wants to work with me. Like, no, not that's not how it happens.
mm. Yeah, that's so true. And I have the feeling that each of us, at some point, we
Hmm.
were in that thought of
Hmm.
this going to be the little thing that is going to change everything. And it's,
Right.
yeah, all the work that you did in the past to arrive to that point maybe has something to do.
Yes, exactly. All that work. Because being an entrepreneur is a game of consistent actions, right? It's a game of consistently following up, consistently marketing, consistently showing up, consistently sharing, consistently, all of it. And so, yeah, it's those actions that it might feel like, oh, I went viral and it was amazing. Yeah, but it was all those consistent actions beforehand that led you up to hitting post on that one particular piece of content.
So true. So, a topic that concerns some of our listeners is privacy. What has been your experience? Have you ever worried about sharing too much?
Oh, absolutely. Um, and mostly because there's social engineering, right? Where if you can look through people's profiles enough, you can gather enough information to, steal their identity or impersonate them or things like that. So that's always a concern from the outside. And then on the inside, Facebook, Twitter's, and TikToks in the news. But on the inside, these companies, I think we forget sometimes that these companies are a business, and their first goal, their main goal, is to make money. And so everything flows from that. So they will do things that won't be beneficial to us as an end user if it makes them money. And
Mm,
typically, privacy is a thing that people as a whole don't push back hard enough on. So the companies are like, well, if you don't care, I don't care. And so things like that happen, at least in the US, right? In the
mhm,
US, that's how it plays out. With the EU, it is a whole different ball game because the EU don't play that. They're very serious about privacy, but in the US, we haven't pushed back in a way that has these companies act differently. And so that's why when people talk about using generative AI and using all of these fancy new tools, I'm for it. I use them. And I always say, do not put something that is your secret sauce that you don't want anybody else to know.
Mm.
Because these companies might say one thing, but we've seen it time and time again, especially if you've been around on the internet long enough, where a company says, "We have never done that." And then 5 years later, there's a lawsuit talking about how they did the exact same thing for 5 years. And they're like, "Oh, no, 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 you misunderstood." And it's like, no, no, you said you never did that thing. And here you are, class action lawsuit because you did that thing.
Mm.
And so it's happened to Facebook multiple times. It's happened to a lot of companies, and so there's always for me just a healthy mistrust of their motivations.
Mm. Yeah. And what about, because something that I recommend my clients around the stories, if you are worried about keeping your privacy,
Mhm.
is that you can share your stories in a superficial levels. You don't need to go into details.
Mhm.
You can go into detail as far as you are comfortable with, but the most important part is the lesson that
Yeah.
you get from the experience and the emotions that you were living in that moment. And that's what is going to connect you with the person that you are talking
Yes.
to and with your audience. So I would love to know your opinion on that
Yeah,
idea
I
of
think
sharing superficially.
no, I think it's still possible, and I think it's the difference in the details, right? So it could be something like where you it would say, "Oh, I was sick last week, and what I learned from being forced to take time off for my business was X, Y, and Z." Versus, I was in North Hanger um, hospital in room 3C last week, hooked up to the ventilator, and this is what I learned from my lesson of not. You don't have to give that much detail. It doesn't have to be that detailed. You can just say, I was taken out of my business due to outside factors. I was sick. This thing happened. So it doesn't have to be super specific to still convey the important and high points. And furthermore, sometimes that level of detail is not interesting to people. And it could be like, oh, that's too much. I have to sort through all of these words to get to the final point of what you want me to walk away with. And so adding all that details could be a thing that deters people.
Mm, yeah, that's an interesting thought about how if you are sharing too much, you can just lose people in that
If
amount of information.
if you think about it, so for me, it's like we all know that we don't have a lot of time. Our attention is distracted. And there are certain things as people we've just decided not to engage with because we don't have time, we don't care about the subject, whatever it is. And so, and there are certain things that people, if you say a word or if you say a phrase, people might be like, nope, that's something I just don't want to engage with. I don't care about that. I'm moving on. Versus if it's more general, it's something that they can be like, oh, okay, I care about the general topic, not that specific thing. So it's just a thought, an idea, and test, test. So if you're like, I don't know, maybe tell me, will people like it or not like it? Test it, see what happens, see the type of responses you get. Try and get either way, and see what works best for you and your audience.
Mm. Yeah, also something else is how every time we share our story, one of these little stories,
Mhm, mhm.
we will get a different angles that we
Yes.
didn't thought about before, or something else that we remember, or even the feedback from our
Yes.
audience will help us to figure it out how to share this story in a more compelling way that
Yes.
is more relevant for our audience, for our offering. So totally agree on the practicing, and test. Allow
Mhm,
yourself to experiment. And I think as a business owner, this is so important because
mhm.
when you think about new things in a way that you are experimenting, you
Yeah.
are allowing yourself to fail or
Yeah.
allowing yourself to just try and see how this result.
Mhm, mhm. I think, and it's one of the things, especially about social media and sharing your story, is that I always liken it to AARP. AARP is a organization for people who are 55 and older. You join, you get discounts, you get little stuff. They send you things in the mail. I am not 55 or older. I do not care about AARP, but they share lots of stories about how they help people and blah, 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 and all that wonderful stuff. There will be a day where I will be 55 or older, and I'm like, oh, well, this is interesting. Okay, tell me more. And it's the same thing for business owners. You will not always be relevant for people, but there's going to be a day they're like, oh, wait a minute. I I remember seeing you. I've seen your stuff before, but now I'm very interested. Let me dig further. And so that's why consistency and sharing your story, even if it feels like it's the same story over and over again, people are in different spaces and they hear things differently in those different spaces. So whether you give it a different slant, whether it's the same story, people might not receive it the same way because they're in a different space.
Yeah, and you always have different ways to share the same story, different angles, different formats, and different platforms, right?
Right.
So it's not just about sharing one post and then you are done. So
Right.
maybe you
Exactly.
need to share that story in several ways and in several times, different platforms, channels that you are using. So, okay, I now want to give you a question that I like to ask to all my guests,
Mhm.
which is what part of your personal brand story surprised people the most?
I would say it's that I've never had a corporate job. So I've
Mm,
never worked, I've always been a business owner. I've always been an entrepreneur. So I've never worked in yeah, I've never had a corporate job.
mm. And this is something that just asking out of curiosity is also the case of your audience, or is a mix of people that are there
No.
or not?
So most of my audience find entrepreneurship out of two different routes, out of hating where they've worked and what it's done to them in their life. And they just feel like there's got to be a better way. Or they want to impact a particular community,
Mm,
a particular cause, and they can't do it within the confines of their job. So they decide to leave so they can start on that journey of making that impact.
nice, because looking for a more meaningful work
Hmm.
is always
Exactly.
a good
Exactly.
inspiration for starting something, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so thank you very much for this. Please, before we finish, tell us how we can learn more about you and the work that you do.
Yeah, I if you are on LinkedIn, I would love to connect on LinkedIn. You can find me at Tamay Shannon on LinkedIn. I'm the only one, so you will find me immediately. Or if you're more of an Instagram person, it is W2S Marketing on Instagram.
Nice. So thank you very much for being here, for sharing all your thoughts and your insight. Has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Who Cares About My Story, the podcast on how sharing your personal brand story can impact your business. If you found this episode valuable, consider subscribing or leaving a review. Your feedback means a lot. Did something resonate with you today? Please share your thoughts on the podcast platform or on your socials. I would love to hear from you and give you a shout out. Just tag me on Instagram at Reme Mancera. I can't wait for you to meet our next guest. Until then, remember, your story is relevant and worth telling.